Oh my god. What absolute fucking root. The bike's so fucking good now. There's something about the O-Chain, even on the high pivot. Welcome to the bike farm. This is my 2021 Commencal Supreme. I know a lot of you have been waiting for some more info on this. 2021 Supreme, extra large, it's 29-27 Mullet version. It's amazing. Best bike I've ever had in my whole life. Easily. It's unbelievable. So first things first, my new competition giveaway site is live. Thanks to all the people who have been buying tickets on there. All the money simply goes into paying for these bikes, paying for my work, and paying for the bike farm to give you guys independent reviews. I'm not paid by any brands. I don't take parts from any brands. All this has either been paid for by me or I already had it in stock from previous jobs. So independent, no bias. I paid full price for the bike, full price for nearly all the parts. Yeah, thanks to everyone for supporting me. The feedback's been really positive. People buying tickets has been really positive. A lot of people spending 60, 80, £100 on tickets. Fantastic. Couldn't ask for any more at the moment. Hopefully now into 2021, got a load of problems behind me, and hopefully we can get some more bike reviews knocked out over the next few months. So to start with, I did make an unboxing video for this bike, which you can see here somewhere. Yeah, no problems unboxing it. It was brand new, really well built, well packaged, set up well, came with all the parts that you could need to put it together. Yeah, no problems there. That didn't last long though, because the first thing we went to do was change the rear shock, and as we undid the bolts, some of the paint did chip off the shock mount, which not a major problem, but it is a little bit upsetting when you spend €6,000 on a bike and before you've rode it you open a bolt and the paint comes off. But yeah, no performance issues there with it, just a little bit sad to see. And also with the paint, there are a couple of small chips, nothing major. Mostly on this side under the seat stay, there's this rubber guard, and I don't know if the rubber guard either needs to be wider or if it was installed a little bit too far inside, but the chain has definitely been chipping away at the paintwork there, so that needs fixing. But yeah, overall this bike's done maybe 18 or 19 days riding. The paint's the only problem. No bolts fell off and rendered the bike unusable for a whole bike park season. Everything stayed tight. Everything worked as it should do. Fantastic. We did split the DT Swiss rim. DT Swiss rims are very, very good in general. And I'm pretty sure just before this run, I was saying to Matthias, the mechanic, how amazing these wheels are and how much abuse they've taken. Next run, split the rim, doing like a 50-60 centimetre drop. Nothing major, but I did land right on a rock. And it was hardly any impact at all, like through the bike, but I think the rim join must have just hit exactly on the rock and just split. I did put this on Instagram, and I had another person say he had something really similar. Just the wheels are super strong, they take all the abuse, but they can just sometimes split if you're unlucky and you hit it in the wrong place. So unlucky or faulty, but we replaced it, no problems. We did try and ride it. We marked with marker pen the crack development and did one more run, and it got way worse. So that day we had to cancel the riding. Ordered a new rim, can't remember how much it was, but aluminium, easy straight swap, 70 or 80 euros, done. Now on the Commencal review, one person did say I should be reviewing the bikes as standard, which I did with the Canyon, and then tuned it. The Commencal came with some similar parts to the Canyon, and I wanted to ride them back to back. So it seems stupid to test with some parts I know I don't like and I know I'm going to change. For example, the rear shock, the brakes, the handlebar grips, we changed all those straight away. Partly because I know that I like them, partly I know I don't like the other products, or I've proven to myself that they're not good enough for the type of riding I want to do, or there's better options. And for example, the Canyon Sender already had a Kitsuma on it, so I changed this shock also for a Kitsuma, and then you can ride back to back, same products, makes testing easier and better and saves time. So that's why I started doing upgrades from the start. Now, I could go into a lot of detail about this BoXXeR Ultimate, which has the NSR damper on the left hand side, left stanchion, and the race only coil springs, which we have on the right hand side, plus some other little tweaks we did to it. And also the Kitsuma, I could go into more detail on that, but my nemesis is making these videos a sensible length of time, so there are going to be some extra videos in the future. Yeah, separate reviews, like I've done a review of these Formula Cura brakes, again link up here somewhere, you can go and check those out. So the first thing that's very impressive on this bike is the balance between the front and rear. It's an extra large frame and it comes with a 457mm chainstay in the 29-27 Mullet version. According to the Commencal site, the full 29er and the full 27 bikes come with 430mm chainstays, and this one's like 27mm longer. Don't know why, maybe that's a running upgrade. But yeah, the Mullet bike has a much longer chainstay, which I like. I'm riding the extra large. It's a 510 reach, and like the head angle's 63. So really long front end. I still don't understand the obsession with short chainstays, especially on long bikes. I think they should get longer. On this bike, the small size has a 435 reach and the extra large has a 505 reach, but the chainstay is the same. But the front end changes 70mm from the small to the extra large. The chainstay stays the same. So I don't think Commencal say this, but any brands that tell you their bike has a perfect balance between all sizes, sorry, I don't believe it. How can you have the perfect balance on a bike when the front end changes so much and the rear end changes the same? One of them has to be wrong, I think. 430mm chainstay for a 435mm reach bike approximately is probably quite good, but then if you lengthen the front end to 505, you want to lengthen the rear end as well. So yeah, 456 is chainstay, and at SAG it's something like 475, 480, so that's pretty good. And one thing that's really noticeable on this bike, with the long chainstay and tons of support from the rear shock, was really tight, steep berms that you're hitting and like generating a lot of G-force. I've never had a bike where I could just stay like so centralized, going to the berms as hard as I could and not going back off the back of the bike as your weight gets thrown backwards, which often happens with a really short chainstay. This thing, I could pretty much just hold myself in the middle of the bike and just rail around berms like I've never experienced on another bike before.
Something's been happening, man. I've never had a bike go around corners like this. Don't know what's happening.
Partly from the shock support, partly from the long chainstay, and also the chainstay gets longer as it goes through the travel. I'm getting this analysed at the moment, but I think this bike, the rear axle path is essentially the same as the front axle path. The front axle path is straight, the rear one's curved, but essentially on average they follow the same line, where bikes where the chainstay gets shorter, your front wheels coming towards you and your rear wheels also coming towards you. Your wheelbase is getting shorter, and if you're tall, this can cause problems with balance. On this bike, both the wheels are going back roughly in the same line, and it's just much sort of more balanced and easier to ride. And it feels great if you're going down steep stuff on the brakes, going through bumps, like you can just feel the main frame just moving backwards and forwards, or the wheels moving towards the frame. You can just feel everything's in a nice straight line. Makes it really easy to control and predict what's going to happen. So yeah, I'm going to talk about the suspension in more depth in the future, but the Kitsuma, great shock. I took the climb switch off because one day I knocked it onto climb somehow and spent the first few runs really confused as to what we'd done to the bike. We knocked the climb switch on, so took that off. Don't need it for downhill, just put some tape over it. The coil version, proved by Dave Rulesman, this shock can handle a lot of heat. He says about 3 times what an average rider can heat shock up to in a run without having any noticeable change in the damping characteristics. It's a coil, so it has that elusive coil-like feel which many brands are trying to find with air, but the coil just has the coil-like feel. It might weigh a few grams more, who cares? You don't have to service the air spring, you don't have to do anything, just put your coil on. A bit more difficult to get your sag sorted, but once your sag is sorted, the coil springs can be more efficient, less servicing, less heat build-up, less friction, coil for downhill. I think the only reason you would use an air shock is if your frame design isn't providing enough support or the shock is not providing enough damping that you need. Then you might want to run an air shock to help ramp up through the stroke. Really, get the right damping, get the right bike, run a coil, easy. And if anyone can prove to me why a lighter weight air shock is going to make you faster down a hill because of the weight saving, which is minimal, I'd like to see it. Scientific evidence from people claiming that lighter bikes go downhill faster would be, I'd like to see it. Twin tube design allows it to have a much bigger range of damping than a single tube design. You can get this shock set up for any bike, any rider from standard. It's pretty cheap compared to some other shocks, or cheaper than other shocks. And you can win one if you follow the link somewhere. And you can also win the BoXXeR upgrade parts on my new site. And I've had 3 Kitsumas so far this year, no problems, all assembled by Tiffany, who writes a nice little card with a name on it. She's killing it, but no problems, no warranty problems, no tuning problems, nothing. Unlike another shock I had on the Banshee, which completely failed after 20 kilometers of riding. Like I said, coil spring, no servicing. The Kitsuma needs a service every 100 hours. Rulesman says more like 70 to 80 for a normal riding, and race use 20 to 30 hours. This is extreme. If you want to get the best performance, get your stuff serviced. I'm sure 100 hours will be okay for the average rider. Rulesman is a helicopter pilot who can rebuild one of these shocks blindfolded, so he's a little bit past what most riders are going to need or want. But yeah, great shock, low service intervals, great. BoXXeR Ultimate on the front. This thing was really good with the air spring with about 18% sag. And the Nigel damper is unbelievable. I just can't really describe how progressive the damping is compared to the stock Charger. It's just softer at the start of the travel and it just builds up. You can really notice the difference between the high speed and the low speed settings on the compression, how it just is easy to ride and how it supports you on the berms and pumping and stuff, and then how it really ramps up and takes the big hits. I haven't bottomed out yet. Had like 195mm travel max, never bottomed out, and done some pretty, not big stuff, but been riding as hard as I can on it. Haven't bottomed it out, which is perfect really. So yeah, just more support in every way, less harshness, more smoothness. Doesn't really make sense, but NSR have done it. He's probably the authority on race tuning for RockShox suspension in the whole world. So that's why he's done it. That's why it's so good. So yeah, haven't managed to bottom it out. Even like the biggest impacts, there's still a few mil of travel left, which I think is perfect. I don't think you should be bottoming out your suspension every run, which is sort of the old sort of method of thought. I think you should nearly bottom out at the time when you can absorb or push back with your maximum amount of force. You don't want to be on your limit of what you can handle and support yourself with and then bottom out, because then you've got problems. That's when you might blow a hand off, or the extra impact can just put your amount of force over the edge. Probably not explaining myself very well, but yeah, you always want a little bit in reserve for that day when you do something really bad, really hard, unexpected, go off a drop too deep, miss the landing. Always want some in reserve just for that day, I believe. So yeah, done a few other things to the fork. That's going to be in the fork video soon. One thing we did see though was it looked like one of the stanchions had just been dropped on the floor in the factory and just anodised over. So not the best quality control there. Probably doesn't have much effect on the performance, but this fork's nearly €2,000 retail price. A lot of money. So you decide if that's acceptable or not. And change into the race only spring, we had less sag, but it's unbelievable. It's softer, still progresses. It's just unbelievably smooth. Like, made a massive difference when we changed to that. We were riding in Viola St. Gris 2 weeks in a row. The prior week, I did like 6 or 7 runs on the black racetrack and was feeling really good. There's a few points where I couldn't really get across some off cambers where I wanted to like set up for these corners, or wasn't quite letting me turn where I wanted. And then the next week we went back, it was colder, it was getting damp, the conditions weren't as good, there was no tape on the track so it was harder to see, it was a bit leafy. First run felt amazing, second run opened it up and was only on Strava, but I was 11 seconds quicker on my second run in worse conditions. And the only thing we changed was the fork spring.
Oh my god. It's absolutely unbelievable. The difference that spring makes and the O-Chain is absolutely massive. I don't think there's anyone racing World Cup downhill who's got a bike that good. And if they don't believe me, they can buy one of those, I'll give them all the settings, and they can test it against their bike and then tell me what they think. Because no one's got such a good mix of all the best parts. And the best frame. Nobody. It's unbelievable. It's like just did 2 runs. First run hit every line I couldn't hit last time. Second run just way faster than last week. And yeah, just hit every line. Perfect. And you can just turn wherever you want and do whatever you want, and it just grips and turns. It's insane. And so quiet now. So quiet with the O-Chain. And my feet didn't move once on either one. He's gone all quiet behind the camera. Good job, we completed mountain bike downhill setup. Done it. Can go home now.
Just gave me loads more confidence and just way better grip and traction across off cambers and across loose stuff to help you set up wider for corners. And it had less sag. It had 15% sag with the coil spring and 18 with the air spring. So there's less sag, but more grip, more traction. Yeah, just unbelievable. You just can't get any better really. The suspension just does everything that you want to do on this bike. Tons of sag, tons of grip, really smooth, takes the biggest hits, absorbs the small hits, supports you in berms, supports you on compressions. Dreamy, it's unbelievable. It's like if you wrote a list of all the things that you want your suspension to do, a dream list. This actually does all of them, front and rear. Now, some people are going to say, this guy's talking rubbish, it's hyperbole, the stock stuff's fine, but I don't believe that. Everything can be made better, nothing's without criticism. Look at the MotoGP and Supercross riders, listen to the really good Gypsy Tales podcast with the pro riders just talking about how their full factory bikes can sometimes be like unrideable for them, and they change something, they change the suspension, they change some settings, suddenly they can ride. So those guys with like, I don't know how much those factory bikes are, $100,000 US, they're still getting improvements by tuning the suspension. There's always more that can be done. This is a massive upgrade over the stock stuff. And I'm going to say, I haven't rode it, but it's a massive upgrade over the same bike with Fox, new Fox stuff, RockShox stuff. Tuned suspension is like #1 performance factor really. Well, once you've got a good bike that fits you and is in good size, good setup, then the suspension's going to be the #1 factor for improving things. Last bit on the fork, this is a 56mm offset fork. I did want to run the crowns backwards to try shorter offset, but the steering lock was just tiny and I got scared. Cancelled that, the reason being my own safety. I'm doing all this for essentially nothing, don't want to hurt myself for no reason. Pushing the limits, so didn't try it on this bike, did try it on the Norco. On the Norco it really helped and the steering lock wasn't too bad, but I did hit the lock a few times. Why do I think it's too long? Well, the longer the offset, the more the bike will steer when you turn. If you're going fast downhill, or you want to go faster downhill, you want the steering from the handlebar to be less, so you can lean the bike over more and go faster. If the offset's too long and you lean the bike over to where you want, you'll turn too much. And this can also lead to understeer as it changes the contact patch. As the handlebars can steer more, the contact patch moves on your tyre forwards, I think. And that causes and can cause understeer or a vague feeling that doesn't really inspire confidence, or you will actually understeer. So I think you can test this fairly easily at home. Bike in a straight line, bike length over, turn the wheel. You can just watch your contact patch go away from where you thought it was, and when you were putting weight into the front wheel, it just goes off forwards away from you. And that's what causes the understeer, as your contact patch changes and stops being in contact with the ground. If you make the offset shorter, it'll steer less as you lean into the corner. So this means you can lean over more or earlier and later at the end of the corners and make bigger, longer, faster arcs, which will make you go faster. And you want to lean over more to go faster to stop you going high side out of the berm. You have to lean more to go around the corners faster. The 36mm offset on the Norco was too extreme with the 29er front wheel. The arc was huge, but you could lean over unbelievable amounts and just carve super long corners. But did cause some problems on like tighter stuff or tighter corners. So 56 is definitely too long, 36 too short. We need a happy medium, I think. If I could get some straight crowns, that would make it 46, but somewhere between 42, 46, 48 is what we should be looking at, I think, for 200mm 29er. If you're going really fast, like World Cup level, you might want to run the 36mm offset, just so you can ride faster corners. If you're a slower rider, the 56 could be fine. And if you aren't going fast and committing and leaning into the corners, then you want to be more upright and steer more to get you around the corners. Well, I hope that makes sense. Most modern enduro bikes now have a shorter offset, 44mm with the 29er on average. I don't know why the downhill bikes still have a longer offset and still use like quite long 50mm stems. Don't know why that is. I can only imagine there's a load of long offset forks and crowns still in the factory somewhere on pre-order or waiting to be sold. So that would be my conspiracy theory. The reason why the offset's still so long. And one other problem with the offsets is all the offset on these forks nearly is in the lowers. So if you want to use shorter crowns, you get a really short steering lock. If you look in general on motorbikes, there's no offset in the fork lower. The wheel axle will be fixed like in line with the fork, and then all the offsets put into the crowns, so you can have a shorter offset and much better steering lock. Hopefully this is going to come to mountain bikes soon, we'll see, but yeah, with these cast lowers, they've got a product cycle of, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 years. So maybe end of next year we might see a new BoXXeR with a shorter offset, we'll see. Also, this long offset feeling of like understeer and steering too much, you can also notice when you're riding more straight line, you'll get more deflection off like angled rocks or roots. Also on off cambers, if you want to carve up a camber to set up for a corner or just stay high on the camber, you'll get more understeer or more deflection as you're trying to get over like off camber root sections or set up for a corner. Michelin tyres. Now, we've tried a few setups with the Michelins. Rear 27.5, really nice rounded profile. This tyre is great. Really solid casing, really heavy, really soft sticky rubber. And the last quite a long time too. On the 29er wheels, the tyres are much more square. And I did ask on Instagram a few months ago for people to send me photos with their rim width, tyre and wheel size. And maybe 20 people got back to me, which is great. Thank you for all the people who got back to me. The 29er Michelin tyres are much more square. I'm going to say too square, that they become vague. Really good on like loose stuff if you want to really drive the edge in to turn. But in general, just too square. Again, a lot of deflection, a lot of like leaning into corners on hard pack, and it's just, you're like right on the corner of the tyre. Didn't like it. So we actually changed to Magic Mary front, downhill casing, super soft compound, ultra soft compound. Good tyre, not quite as sticky as a Michelin, not quite as stiff in the casing as a Michelin. Really good tyre overall, and did solve that problem. So if it was a 29er Michelin with a rounded profile of the 27 on the 29, I would run that. For whatever reason, the tyres aren't coming up in the same shape. So if we had a narrower rim, 25mm rim say, that might give us the rounded shape that we want, more rounded shape that we want. But yeah, just small little tweaks to try and get the bike perfect. And also been running these really soft, been running 17 down to 17 psi Michelin front and like 21 rear. Under 21, get too much roll on the back, too much tyre roll, but you can run it 21, 17 front, and it feels really good, really smooth, tons of grip, and yeah, really stiff casing. So sort of feels more like an old, let's say, Maxxis downhill casing tyre when we used to run inner tubes. It's a lot stiffer to run a tyre with an inner tube than without an inner tube, tubeless. That's why tubeless makes tyres roll faster, because there's less stiffness in the tyre. The inner tube inside actually creates more friction and essentially thickens the tyre carcass. Instead of being a 2-ply, it becomes like a 3-ply. Whereas these Michelins feel more like a 3-ply, just guessing. But yeah, super stiff, fantastic tyres. What else? Brakes. These Formula brakes, absolutely amazing. They just got so much power. The lever feels so light. Yeah, we've got a bit of grip tape on there, just for extra accuracy. They're just unbelievably good. The Trick Stuff pads are just unbelievably powerful. That front brake with a 220mm rotor is just insane. We ran the standard sintered pads on the rear on this bike to have less power and last a bit longer. But still with a 220mm rotor, just unbelievable power, especially on the smaller wheel. It's unbelievable how you can just be going so fast and through such rough stuff and just then putting in so little force onto the lever. It makes it much easier to modulate the power, and you can just easily pull them at the right time. Yeah, unbelievable brakes. But they're 2-piston, so they don't have any power if you listen to some people. Yeah, 2-piston brakes, tons of power. Probably less modulation than the 4-piston, but power, massive. Lever feel, fantastic. For the next part of the tuning process on this bike, which is getting even more exciting, we're going to go back to 203mm rotors. Partly I just don't like brake mounts and fixing brake mounts to your forks and frame. Yeah, brakes, unbelievable. Pretty cheap, no problems. What else have we done to this bike? The O-Chain. We added the O-Chain, which makes a massive difference, an unbelievable difference really.
There's something about the O-Chain, even on the high pivot.
Most brands who are making high pivot bikes will tell you there's no pedal kickback, and I think the old Commencal Supreme did have no pedal kickback. This one, the jockey wheel's actually lower than the pivot, so the chain line as it runs over the idler looks like it's slightly lower than the pivot. This should give it some anti-squat and pedal kickback. I've been told it's about 12 degrees pedal kickback, which is the same as the setting on the O-Chain, 12 degrees of absorption. I'm waiting for analysis from Andre XTR on this. It's definitely smoother through the pedals, less force coming through the pedals, and just quieter and smoother overall. Could be simply that the O-Chain sort of adds some damping to the lower chain line and stops the chain slapping so much. Plus pedal kickback, reduction. Yeah, you wouldn't think it, but the O-Chain really improves this bike. I'm starting to think it would just improve any bike. Can't explain why it improves it. Someone out there can probably prove this for me. This is past my level of skill, technology that I own, understanding. But yeah, it's definitely rides better, it's definitely smoother, it's definitely quieter, easiest ride on flat pedals. I think the reason why this bike has some anti-squat compared to the previous one is I think the racers are asking for more anti-squat because those guys are going insanely fast and they're looking for every bit of performance they can, and I think it's to add support when they're pumping to generate more speed when pumping. Think of a track like Leogang World Cup downhill where they've got this long motorway section, and a lot of the World Cup tracks now are really fast and there's lots of places to pump. If you've got more anti-squat, you've got more support from the suspension, the chains stopping the bike compress. So yeah, more anti-squat, you should be able to generate more speed through the bumps. And that's it. It's just absolutely amazing. No problems, good price. All the tuning stuff we've done to it's great. Absolutely fantastic bike. How does it compare to the Canyon Sender? Considering we set them up with nearly identical parts, they're still very different. The main difference is you can't run the same amount of sag on the high pivot bike. Now I don't know exactly why, but we're running 30% on the Commencal, which is sweet. Tried to start with the same settings on this. You can't do it. It just goes through the travel much more easily when you hit bumps from the high pivot design. Again, I can't explain exactly why, but 30% sag on each bike. The bike's completely different. We ended up following the recommendations and we got more towards the firm 17% sag, 11mm. So now we got 17% rear, 15% front, very balanced. But yeah, for some reason, even with less sag, the wheel just moves out of the way and goes into the travel more when you're hitting bumps and when you're braking. So yeah, you have to run less sag on the high pivot bike, which makes one big change. The big change is the geometry, completely off the top of my head, the geometry is quite different. I'm going to say the head angle is about 2 degrees slacker in your dynamic riding position on the Supreme over the Canyon Sender. We do have an angle set for this, a 2 degree angle set to drop in as part of the next tuning process. Compared to the Sender, feels steeper. I would like to make it slacker because the Sender the front wheel was always out in front of me and I could really drive it into corners, into the ground and really brake hard because the front wheel's further away. But I would like the Supreme to be a bit slacker, or to try it being a bit slacker, to get the dynamic ride geometry more similar. Under braking though, this bike just settles into the travel way more. The Sender's trying to pitch forward. The Supreme was really good. The Canyon was really good under braking. Sort of more predictable and sort of smoother, but I think you get more grip from the high pivot. And I think this is because if the brake's on or locked, it's trying to resist the wheel going into the travel, and it basically just pushes the tyre into the ground more, so it's a bit rougher, but you get more grip, so you can slow down more. And I also think, and I would love, again, someone to analyse this for me, I think the way the high pivot bike works, if you're heading downhill, the contact patch is moving less towards the rear of the tyre as it goes through the travel, because the wheel's going backwards more. On the more conventional bike with a vertical or forwards axle path, which is going to be like this, it rotates the contact patch away from the ground as you're braking and as you get pitched forward. I think this is again hard to explain. So your contact patch actually moves away from the ground that it's attached to, and I think on this bike it happens less, so you can brake harder later and have more grip. If anyone can analyse that for me, I'd love to see it and add it to my random ideas about these bikes. I did say in the unboxing video that I didn't like this Physique saddle because it's got a really sharp edge, and on the Canyon Spectral trail bike I was riding, where the saddle was higher and flatter, it really beat up my legs while I was on a photo shoot in Switzerland. But because of the downhill bike, the saddle's lower and we've got the saddle tilted further back. Had no problems with that sharp edge, absolutely fine. What else did we do? Haha, I keep telling people to get the SQ Lab 711R grips, the push-on grips, and the clamp-less version of these 711 grips. There's definitely different rubber compound. The 711R with no clamp is a much harder compound compared to the 711 with the lock ring. These just way softer and absorb way more. And I was a bit confused that they were just beating my hands up with the other grips all the time. Then we've changed these and they're just way softer, way more vibration absorption. Yeah, solid grips. I no longer recommend the 711R. That's it. I hope a lot of that made sense. A lot of that was very difficult to try and explain concisely with my brain and mouth. Hopefully you got the point. We are going to be tuning this bike up further. I did have an antidote downhill bike on order where I wanted to build the greatest downhill bike in the world. But originally I told that would be October. Last year it's now looking like the end of February and I'm hopefully going to a race in April. And I don't think I have time or don't trust the bike's going to turn up on time and be able to build it on time. So we go in a few upgrades. Dorado RRT 37mm carbon, first one ever made. Cane Creek double barrel heritage shock, one of one in the world in that size. Different wheels. We're going to downgrade the brakes to smaller rotors because they're being overperforming, which is rare. Change the cockpit slightly. Got some new handlebars and stem on order. Very special bits. Going to upgrade the O-Chain hopefully. Yeah, new wheels, some extra tyres and a few of the little tweaks, which is going to make this has got to become, I think this is already the best downhill bike in the world. I can't see any of the bike being better than it. Yeah, there's lighter ones and there's more pretty ones and there's ones that people make to put on the scales and not actually ride, but I'm going to say this is the best downhill bike in the world. I'm going to say it's better than most bikes on the World Cup circuit because the riders on the World Cup circuit don't have the choice of parts that I do. I'm not saying I'm better than them, I'm not being arrogant, but through my contacts in the industry and experience, I think we've built the best downhill bike in the world. And if anybody wants to come and ride it at some point, you're more than welcome. Obviously it's extra large, it's got to fit you. So if anyone wants to meet me at some point and ride it, you can get in touch. If you're a racer who wants to bring your bike and ride it against this bike, and we'll do some timing. Yeah, let's go for it. So yeah, again, thanks for the support. Link in the description. You can win a brand new Kitsuma built for your specification, bike weight, delivered from Rulesman. You can win a race only spring with your weight of choice, again shipped for only £2. You can also win an NSR damper and RockShox Super Deluxe rebuild piston kit, which gives you 5 tunes. Now this has sold a lot fewer tickets than I would have expected so far. It's absolutely amazing. You should buy tickets for it. And I have 3 BoXXeR cartridges in the post. So if you want a BoXXeR cartridge, you'll win a BoXXeR cartridge from my stock. But if you read the small print in the competition, NSR Racing can also build you one for Zeb, Lyric, Pike, all the other forks, providing you can get one because they're very hard to come by. So yeah, NSR damper to fit any RockShox fork, custom built for you. You can win it for £4, great. And you can win a Kitsuma for £4 and all the tickets fund doing all this. I think that's it. 1 hour and 20 minutes of talking rubbish.
Fucking bikes, man. So hard to actually do any proper testing without problems. Punctures, batteries going, cracked rims, brake pads wearing out, people on the track. Jesus. It's all bloody good fun though.